If you're not stupidly obsessed with plastic idols like me, you might think about 2008 as the start of the financial recession. But in my opinion, the far more important recession that was simultaneously occurring was the end of the golden era of action figures. Toy Biz had gone defunct, Marvel Legends was on hiatus, and the beginning of the end for Star Wars 3 3/4 was at hand. But on the other side, a brand new hit series was becoming the most highly praised drama of all time, Breaking Bad. Tied together with the end of every single popular thing getting its own action figure line. Much to my further depression, it was a true miracle that Walter and his gang were able to pull themselves through and onto the shelves. Sadly, as you'll see though, very few of our classic iconic Breaking Bad cast got immortalized in plastic, but you might still be surprised by just how very weird and repulsive these things can get. Surprisingly, one of the biggest lines of collectibles Breaking Bad got was in the form of dolls, and not in the way that normies call action figures dolls, but legitimate plush dolls. And I love these. They have removable clothes, accessories, and they even talk. Like, imagine if Woody from Toy Story was from Breaking Bad, and that's these dolls. Now, the reason I'm choosing to cover these first is because the set's really expansive. And also, the first piece I got was the Heisenberg. When I show you this picture of the entire set, and you're thinking just how excited you are to cuddle Jesse Pinkman as you go to sleep, then it's gonna break your heart when I tell you that only a few of the Walter variants actually made it to full production. Still, this is probably one of the best, if not the best, pieces of Jesse merch ever, even if it never actually got released, weirdly being one of the few to show him in his classic iconic outfit. If you've seen pretty much any of my previous videos, at least in the current Gear One Gamer era, then you'll surely recognize the reaction line, because I've talked about these a ton. But these figures are from back in the early days of the line, when Funko was still in charge of distribution, and their dreaded touch is seen all over these figures, as they're quite a bit cheaper than Super 7's modern figures, but they're still serviceable, if a little under-detailed, even for the reaction line. And the character lineup will set a precedent for the upcoming figure lines as well, consisting of Heisenberg, Walter White, Jesse Pinkman, Gus with and without the face, as well as Walter and Jesse in their hazmat suits. Easily the best merchandise ever released for Breaking Bad was the 6-inch scale figures released by Mezco. The figures are all entirely unarticulated despite looking like they should be, but as we've seen, that's fairly typical for this type of figure. Still, they all come with a variety of accessories that are helpful in setting up a good display and add a needed bit of flair to the otherwise static figures. The line came in two different styles of packaging, one on a card back and another with a slipcase. I personally prefer the slipcase just because of how nice they look and how easily they stack. Scott Pilgrim figures by IHS also come in this style, and I've actually kept all the boxes for those as well as the Breaking Bad figures, which I normally don't do. The Mezco line had a lot, and I truly mean a lot, of variants, so I'll cover those after I just list the actual different characters they released in the line. And I'll just preface it by saying that the lineup is quite disappointing, consisting only of Walter, Jesse, Saul, and Gus. Only making 4 out of the numerous classic iconic characters really is disappointing, and the Jesse here is definitely the weakest, bearing little resemblance to the character, and that may actually be because there was a cancelled next wave of figures that would have included a much better Jesse. This lost wave was shown off at the same con as the cancelled dolls, but unlike those, however, we never actually saw prototypes, where Mezco simply showed pictures of Mike, Walter in his underwear, and a streetwear Jesse. The cancellation of these figures really is disappointing, especially Mike, adding a good bit of life to the shelf, as Mike would give a good sidekick to Gus or Saul, and also never giving us Jesse in his vastly more iconic look just really leaves a key figure missing from the collection. The first variant I'll cover is definitely the best, and unfortunately the only variant that actually gives us a different and unique mold, and it's Gustavo Fring with half his face blown off. The gore and melted and blown away flesh on this figure is awesome, and it just gives me old McFarlane vibes. You know, let me know if I should cover something like McFarlane's Twisted Fairy Tales or Tortured Souls, because I don't own any of it, but I'd definitely love to do some deep dives into it, because those horrific designs are just so awesome. Anyways, the rest of the variants are simple palette swaps of Jesse and Walt, except for one Saul Goodman giving him a green shirt and red tie. I know, real exciting stuff. The Walter White figure also got a number of variants, with his pilot look, all beige look, blue shirt, as well as a darker colorway, with the box labeled as Heisenberg. These variants are all pretty cool, as I have the Heisenberg figure, but even though it's the exact same mold, I really would like to get my hands on one of the Walter White figures, particularly the green shirt pilot look. All the remaining variants are different colorways of Walt and Jesse in their hazmat gear. These are pretty much the same for each figure, so I'll go over them in sets. Firstly, my favorites are the Vominos Pest suits, as they actually do have just a little bit of added detail in the Vominos Pest logo being plastered on their chest, and the rest just have no added details at all, and are the very definition of color swaps, being hazmat suits in orange, white, and turquoise. As a final note for the Mezco figure line, in similar fashion to the Bowie and Kurt Cobain figures I covered before, there are 3 12-inch Walter White variants, with 2 being his Heisenberg clothes, with the only difference being his pants color, and the shirt being a slightly different color. Now, strangely, the blue shirt version also has an upscaled version, but it has the same black jacket as Heisenberg and is also labeled, for which I can only assume to be money-saving reasons. Overall, the Mezco line had a lot of promise, and I think if it came out just a few years earlier, it wouldn't have been so crushed by Funko's domination over the collectible market. And trust me, when it comes to Breaking Bad, they really did control the market. Like I said, even being in charge of the reaction figures at this point. To finish out this bender of Breaking Bad toys, I'll cover some random, bizarre, and truly ugly and grotesque plastic immortalizations of our favorite rambunctious drug dealers. The definitive poster child for ugly merchandise of any franchise is mystery figures. With few exceptions, these small, cheap loot crates of often poorly stylized figures are nothing worth mentioning, let alone buying. But this set does solve my main complaint of lack of representation for other characters. On the other hand, these are like the irradiated, hate-driven incest children of Funko Pops and Pez dispensers, with the overly detailed and overly sized heads being plopped onto small, disproportionate bodies. But if you're just dying to get a Marie action figure, then here you go. Also, little side note, I find it hella weird that they chose to make Marie over Skylar. For some more ugly stylization, we've got these plush toys of Walt and Jesse. Somehow they still beat Mezco because they actually gave us Walt and Jesse in both hazmat and casual gear, so you can have the duo and not have one missing. These guys also came in smaller sizes as keychains, which also works better than the larger versions, where Jesse's little puppy eyes are just constantly staring me down. And of course, I can't talk about Breaking Bad plushies without mentioning the Pink Bear. As the arguable mascot of the franchise, being one of the largest sources of mystery after its appearance in the cold open for Season 2, there have been a few versions of this released, but I think we all want accuracy here, and in my opinion, the most show-accurate Pink Bear was also released by Mezco, with the U2's version being a far too stylized for what I would want to be a prop replica. Overall, the merch released for Breaking Bad was really indicative of the era of collecting in which it was released in, and which the show came to its rise. Unfortunately, this rise was during what I and most others considered to be the collecting dark ages, when Funko was everywhere and every company was just trying to come up with their own version of Funko Pops to capture success. And unfortunately, a majority of Breaking Bad's merchandise came in this form, with only a few quality and show-accurate figures being released. But unlike most of the stuff I've covered, Breaking Bad certainly hasn't left the public eye, and even with Better Call Saul ending a few years ago, the franchise's popularity has yet to wane, and I think if the right company gets the license, we could see a really solid line of figures that comes out, giving us the classic iconic characters we all want, like Ted, and of course Huel.